It's 5 o'clock in London. It's midday in New York, midnight in Hong Kong, 2 a.m. in Sydney, 9 a.m. in San Francisco, and I do believe it's 9:30 or possibly 10:30 at night in Mumbai. Greetings, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world today. My name is Patrick L. Young. The IPO-VID live stream, Series 24, Episode 1. That is in the aggregate, unless you can do your 6 times table faster than me. Episode number 139 starts here. Let's look at Women's History Month. That was last month, ladies and gentlemen. Throughout March, Exchange Invest was proudly celebrating the achievements of women in exchanges. Our all-female panel chose a series of trailblazers. Adina Friedman, the CEO of NASDAQ, driving innovation and paving the way for women in finance while revolutionizing NASDAQ as it invents tomorrow. NYSE President Lynn Martin is a beacon of brilliance in a landscape traditionally dominated by men, a data maven, derivatives guru, and now the doyen of Wall Street's most famous institution. Alina Aldenbergian, the Kazakhstan Stock Exchange CEO, has run case with unwavering dedication, groundbreaking innovation, and a commitment to propelling 30-year-old Kazakh to ever greater heights. Bonnie Chan has transformed the Hong Kong Exchange's listed markets and champions diversity in finance ahead of her elevation to CEO of the Hong Kong Exchange Group in recent months. And last but by no means least, Anne Berg's achievements helped pave the way for women in traditionally male-dominated fields across the commodity markets and broke barriers as a grain exporter and member director of the Chicago Board of Trade. So there we are, ladies and gentlemen, our fabulous women trailblazers we chose last month. I have this feeling my masculine intuition tells me we're going to hear about another woman trailblazer in a moment with our fabulous guest, Bharat, who's with us today. But let's look at what's been happening in exchanges over the course of the last week. Sanctions are back in the spotlight as the US and UK have banned trade in Russian metals. That impacts the CME, the LME, and a lot of warehouses in between. Iranian sanctions tightening, meanwhile, has locked Russian oil on tankers. Then in Kazakhstan, government statements are making it clear that a merger of the AIX and KZ are being pushed from the political top down. And then indeed, DB1 is doing the dark pool hokey cokey. Deutsche Börse, having closed Sector midpoint in 2017, is now getting back into the game with Sector midpoint revisited, just as Euronext relaunched their dark pool. Our guest today, ladies and gentlemen, is Bharat Kulkarni. Our topic, markets, the winds of change. Dr. Bharat Kulkarni has worked on the establishment of no fewer than 4 commodity exchanges in Africa alone and advised on warehouse receipt systems all over the continent. He has consulted across agricultural project investments and the agricultural value chain in Africa and Asia, with clients ranging from private investors to government. Dr. Kulkarni is a former commodity trader who's worked for MCX India, the IFPRI, and the United Nations, amongst many others, on his glittering and illustrious career. During his stint with the United Nations, he worked on redeveloping the value chain of coffee and sesame in Ethiopia. And he's the author of this magnificent book, ECX and the Winds of Change, which we're going to be talking about slightly later. Bharat, welcome to IPO-VID. Good evening to you. Where in the world are you today? And indeed, what time is it?
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you for your kind words. I am currently in Mumbai, and it's just past 9:30 in the evening, and very happy to be with you on this.
Delighted that you could join us as well, Bharat. Thank you very, very much for coming to the show. That's absolutely marvelous to have you here, and we are looking forward to a very interesting show this evening. Can you tell me very quickly, how did you get into financial markets in the first place?
So I chose my education into finance. So I'm a commerce graduate, then took up a master's in finance. And that is the time when the Indian financial markets were getting a lot of changeover. This was the early 2000, late 90s, early 2000, when we started to have the NSE was established, the markets were opening up, IPOs were coming in. Regulations were becoming strong. So it was a field which was really growing. And index futures had just started, and I did my MBA project on index futures, which really attracted me to the derivatives. And eventually commodity derivatives came in. And so that's how I got into the financial markets.
Wow. So you got in there just at the point when everything was taking off, around about the birth then of competition between the NSE and MCX and so on. Where did you work for, first of all?
I was a lecturer in finance in the beginning in a city called Indore, which is my hometown. So I worked for there about for 3-4 years, and then moved to MCX. And that was MCX was just established. It was just gaining momentum. I remember I was one among the first 100 people recruited by MCX.
Wow. And the first 100 people recruited by MCX. So MCX, I mean, quite a legendary business, because that took what was previously an incredibly disjointed commodities market across India and really started to make a holistic series of national markets in all manner of things.
Yeah. So 2002, MCX got its license. The commodity markets in India have a very long history. Just after Chicago Board of Trade started trading about 15-20 years later, the cotton markets in India opened up. And the city I told you, Indore, my grandfather and colleagues of my grandfather would tell me that those were the times in late 1890s and early 1900, when through the radio link at 11:30 in the night India time, they would release the New York Cotton Exchange prices. So Indian commodity markets really has a very checkered history. We were into the commodity derivatives very early. Then the restrictions came in, then the ban came in, and then finally in 2000, the government decided that no, commodity markets are really required for this economy. And then we had the reintroduction of the commodity exchanges in India. But the difference was, these were all electronically driven markets, national presence, and that made a lot of difference.
It's an interesting question, and one which we could probably discuss for the entirety of this show. But it seems quite remarkable to me that India set about allowing the idea, or even encouraging the idea, of one national price for a vast range of commodities, because surely that's incredibly difficult to achieve given the sheer topography, let alone the geography and size of India.
Yeah, but in the physical markets in India, there were still benchmark markets. So if you look at the soybean oil, for example, my hometown Indore used to be the reference market, and then based on that, the national prices would be discovered based on the transportation and other costs. So that's what exactly the exchanges also tried to do. The price was discovered on national level, a single market price for the national level, and then they would have the adjustments because of the transportation cost and all. But that, I still feel somewhere it actually made the prices more artificial than actual, because India being such a huge country, and very interesting thing I'll explain you about the spot and the future difference in India. They say that
Please.
The spot and the difference is actually the definition of forward trades, which is eventually futures, is any trade that happens beyond 11 days. Now, why 11 days? Because that's the time that used to take to transport the goods from the northernmost part of the country to the southernmost part of the country. So when you have a country which has such a huge landmass, creating a national price may distort prices. And that's what was debated for very long in India.
It's a fascinating pointer, that actually, the 11-day spot market, because that's how long it took you to get from the northeastern or northwestern corners all the way down to the south end of Kerala or wherever. It's quite remarkable, reminiscent of those old 3-week stock settlement systems in the UK, because that was how long it took a man to get on a horse at the Amsterdam Exchange and deliver the arbitrage piece of paper to the London Stock Exchange so that it could be settled, and why we had those sorts of accounts and so on. Obviously, they weren't using horses. It's just an incredible distance to drive, even by a truck or train, over the course of that period of time. So tell me, what were you up to at MCX? What were your particular responsibilities over the years?
So my responsibility, MCX was first exchange in India that really took the training of the stakeholders very seriously. And right from the inception, it established a department that was working exclusively for capacity building and training. So I was part of that team. We were the team that set up the certification examination for MCX participants. We set up the first ever diploma in India, because in India, commodity markets were really not part of the formal education system in the universities and the colleges. So we introduced a diploma program in partnership with academic institution called Wellington Institute of Management, where we brought in the commodity markets into the mainstream of academics. And then we used to do a lot of workshops with traders, very practical oriented workshops. How do they trade? Because, futures is a double-edged sword.
Yes.
The problem is you commit a mistake because of your ignorance about the market, and then you start blaming the market. And that creates a perception issue. To avoid that, we realized that it would be very important to train the stakeholders effectively. And that's what my role was. And then we also worked on a little bit of research, and because we were into the knowledge part of the exchange. So research, new product development, things related to that.
That's absolutely fascinating. I mean, the whole education thing blows my mind, because if I remember correctly, I seem to recall Lamont Rutten, who's in your book, of course, who was one of the joint managing directors of MCX. I seem to remember him going to an earlier AFM, Association of Futures Markets conference many years ago, and pointing out that the MCX Academy, or however you termed yourselves, I mean, you used to traditionally educate something like 600,000 people a year would attend your courses, which is pretty mind-boggling. And that's the population of Luxembourg, which qualifies as a full European Union state. These are numbers that are just absolutely surreal when you look at the scale that that market had, and all of the ways in which you operated very, very interesting initiatives, let's put it that way, to distribute your prices, to get the market message out there. I know you had to deal with the Indian Post Office at one point in time. Quite fascinating how you really tried to reach down to the base level of the farmers.
That's true. In fact, Lemo was a major reason why the training department was given so much of importance. And I have a lot of respect for Lemo, because a lot of things I've learned from him. And he brought in a concept where, or he introduced me to a concept where he said that there are three components that make a market successful: government regulations, exchange operations, and the third is capacity building. Very favorable government regulations, very good operations, but if people really do not have capacity to use it, it all goes down the drain. So I think that was something which we focused as our core principle and worked a lot on training department. You'll be surprised, when I actually resigned from MCX, I had 85 days of accumulated leaves, which I had worked on Saturdays and Sundays. So that because what would happen is every stakeholder, he would like to work, he would not compromise on his working day. He would say, okay, training is important for me, but I can't give my trading time for training, and then come on Saturdays and Sundays, and we would go on Saturdays and Sundays and do the training programs. And yes, those numbers which Lemo gave are realistic.
Yeah, it's quite incredible altogether. I've got to say, talking of numbers, we've already got some great numbers coming in today in terms of the people who are watching and also those who are commenting. Thank you so much for your comment. You know what? You could really do us a favor here. Would you share a little bit of love between myself and Bharat, please? I'm asking it because artificial intelligence needs love. Most of all, when artificial intelligence sees you hitting that heart button in the corner, wherever you're watching this show this evening, that pushes us up the rankings and allows more people to understand the benefits of markets, how they help farmers, how commodities can manage to be traded, and indeed, therefore, people will understand better how we can manage to create economic growth in this world, wherever it may be. So thank you very much, Anil Bandi, for your kind comment. I'm delighted that you can say hi, enjoying your interview. Hello, Sheila H. Very good interview. You're drawing in the crowds this evening already, Bharat. And Bharat Kulkarni, I do sense there might be a modicum of nepotism in that comment, who's enjoying your interview, but that's welcome. That's all the better. Even your family are watching and enjoying you. So obviously you haven't told them these stories too many times before, Bharat, which is absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, Anil, Sheila, Hemu, and also Dilip Mulye. Very good interview. Really great to see you on the show today. Send us a little bit of love. If you've got a question for Bharat, feel free to ask it. So, Bharat, you said to us, you eventually left MCX. What did you get up to next?
So, I went to Ethiopia during my tenure with MCX, and we did the training program in Ethiopia for the upcoming Ethiopia Commodity Exchange. Now, it was a difficult and a different experience, because they were setting up a spot exchange. We were used to the futures exchange, so adapting the futures exchange knowledge to the spot exchange was really a learning experience. But that it was a very exciting project. So Dr. Eleni, she asked me if I would like to come and contribute to the development of the Ethiopia Commodity Exchange. And I thought this is a very interesting opportunity, because it's one in lifetime type of opportunity where it was a risky decision, I must say, because MCX was, we were getting ESOPs, we were getting a lot of attention, we were getting a lot of, say, patronage from MCX members. So it was a very good life. But then there was an urge to do something which is really more meaningful. Not that MCX job was not meaningful, but if doing something in Ethiopia, in a country which has a lot of history of food insecurity, and doing something for people there, learning something new. All these things, spoke to my family. Everybody said, let's go to Ethiopia. And that's how I landed up in Ethiopia.
So you landed in Ethiopia. Now, there's an interesting nation to deal with, and we'll get back to Eleni Gabrimedan in just a moment, because she's a fascinating lady, and I hope one day she'll be on this show as well. But you land in Ethiopia. Now, that's, I mean, not a lot of people know a huge amount about the history of Ethiopia, but I mean, they had been, on the day you landed, they'd been essentially a communist country only, 20 years before, something like that. They were still getting to grips with developing a kind of market-based economy from the ground up, let alone commodities exchanges.
That's true. I think Ethiopia came out of the civil war. The new government was doing a lot of work for the restructuring of Ethiopia, redevelopment of Ethiopia. But the mindset was still very socialistic. I would not call communist, but yeah, very, very socialist mindset. They would have very specific ideas and the role of government in their mind. And that made the free market economy concept also a bit difficult to understand, even for the regulators. There was no history of a stock exchange. There was no centralized payment system. The interbank payments, electronic payment systems were not there. So in absence of those whole infrastructure, conceptually, it was a very difficult, say market to develop a free market economy institution like an Ethiopia Commodity Exchange. But what we really benefited from was a very strong conviction of the government that this is something that they really need to do, and they put a lot of weight behind us, and that made things very different there. But yes. For people to understand what is a free market economy, it took them about 7 years to actually understand what it is. Because regulators, they would not know the difference between regulating and self-regulating. So they would want to get into the minute details of the exchange and all, and then we have to tell them, no, this is exchange prerogative. This is where exchange regulates. You regulate the exchange. So it took us. It was a learning curve for a lot of people there.
Yes, it's quite difficult when you're coming from economies that have been very socialistic. I mean, even I can remember the stories of the people who were going to places like Poland after the end of communism, and they would sit down with the people in the tax office, and the tax office would say, what are you going to do? And then they would explain what their sort of business model was, and the tax office would say, well, you're not going to make any money out of that. I don't think you should do it. I'm not going to let you do it. And they would say, but you don't have any right to stop us doing it. It's an open market. I can decide to lose my money now, however I want to. Your job is to make sure that I basically regulate myself, pay my taxes, and do corporate governance. Quite fascinating. We've got another raft of comments coming in as well. Radhika Bandi, very good, Bharat. She's saying, thank you so much for joining the show, Radhika. Dilip Mulye saying again, another comment, I am proud of you. So there you go. You're bringing out your fan zone that evening. Bharat Kulkarni, great going, dear. Proud of you. And in fact, they're coming in as we talk. Asmita Kajanchi, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Asmita. Proud to see you. Delighted to listen. And Ashish Muley is saying, insightful, great going, Bharat. Please do leave a heart. And if you have a question, they will be very, very much appreciated, because that helps rocket us through. The more likes that we get here, the better it is for this show, and the better it is for indeed Bharat's audience, because this is going to be archived on posterity so that everybody can manage to hear. So, you know, it's very interesting, Bharat, as you say. I think actually one point, you made that very interesting point about what Lamont Rutten had been saying when he was joint managing director of MCX, about the three things that it was essential that an exchange provided. At the same time, I think you mentioned one thing that's absolutely essential to have in a jurisdiction, particularly when you're building a new exchange, and that is the support of government. I don't mean that the government is in your back pocket at all points in time, or that they're micromanaging what you do, but just to be able to have that ability to, you know, phone a friend, like all of those game shows, and talk to someone and have the support of government is so vital. And I think that's something that doesn't get spotted across a large number of these different marketplaces and environments. So, You get to Ethiopia. It must be, I mean, I imagine coming from India, arriving in Ethiopia is a bit of a culture shock.
Culture shock, not really, because the Ethiopian culture, the Indian culture, a lot of similarities are there. I had been there earlier, but yes, there were a lot of shocks and few interesting stories I would like to share here. Ethiopia has its own time zone. So I landed up in Ethiopia. Day 2, I went to the bank to exchange some currency, and there's a driver who took me there. And I went to the bank and I said, I want to exchange currency. This was the European time, 3:30 in the afternoon, and 3:35 maybe. So the lady on the counter said, "Oh no, the bank is closed." I said, "Fine. What time does it open?" So she says 3:30. So I thought maybe she has misunderstood. I said, "So is it? No. I'm asking what times it opens, not close." She said, "No, it opens at 3:30." I'm like, "Then why are you not changing?" She said, "Because it's 9:30." And like there's some confusion. I came out of the bank, sat in the car, and spoke to my driver. So he asked me, "What happened? Did you get the money?" I said, "No, we'll have to come back tomorrow because they're closed now." They said, "Yeah, it's 9:30." I said, "What is this 9:30, 6:30?" I was confused. Then a very good friend of mine, Ben, in Ethiopia Commodity Exchange. So I asked him, I said, "Ben, what is this whole confusion about?" So he started laughing and he said, in Ethiopia, there are two times, Habesha time, which is the Ethiopian time, and the European time. So if you go by the European clock, midnight, 12 o'clock, the day starts. But if you go by the Ethiopian clock, at 6 o'clock in the morning, the day starts. So it starts with sunrise. So when it is 6:30 in the European clock, it's actually 3:30 in the Ethiopian time. So if you're in Ethiopia and somebody invites you for lunch at 6:30 a.m., don't be surprised.
Don't be surprised. Well, that's interesting. Certainly, it's an interesting way to get around jet lag because your body will be so confused as to what's going on. You won't have any idea what's happening, Bharat. That's quite incredible. Thank you very much, if I may say so, to Samuel Ogola Anyango, who says, great knowledge on this show. Thank you very much. That's via LinkedIn. I'm sorry if the LinkedIn stream seems to be not quite connecting perfectly to us. And we've also got Milinda Dharmadikari. It's lovely to see you today. Way to go, Bharat. I agree. Isn't it great to have Bharat here sharing his knowledge with us today? Thank you very, very much, Milind. So there are certain things, of course, which are different, which is every country you go to, the food and the drinking customs and so on are somewhat different. India, a big place on the agenda of tea, I always think, but you get to Ethiopia and obviously coffee is a key factor.
That's true. Coffee is not only a commodity in Ethiopia, it is part of culture. It is believed by Ethiopians that coffee, and a lot of people in the world, that the coffee actually was discovered in Ethiopia. There's a very interesting story. There's a village called there's a forest called Kaffa, where there was a goat herder called Kaldi, who would go into the forest with his goats, and his goats would eat a specific fruit, and the goats would feel very excited. So he thought this is something very different. So he took those fruits and brought back to the monasteries. So monasteries said, "Oh, this is some devil's fruit." So they threw it in the fire. So it got roasted. Then they said it could not be burned. So they put it in the water. That became coffee, and that was how coffee was discovered. So Ethiopia has a very, very strong cultural coffee is imbibed in their cultural belief, and even socially. When we were doing the commodity exchange, the standardization of coffee in Ethiopia, every village, the coffee from every village will be known by the village name. So there's a village called Asosa, there's a village called Bonga. So they would say, this is the Asosa coffee or Bonga coffee or whatever name they would give it to based on the village. These villages fall under a bigger ambit or bigger group of or landmass, which is called as Irga, Chafe or Sidama, which are internationally recognized brands of coffee. So when we started to standardize, there was about 700, 800 types of coffee in Ethiopia. So for a commodity exchange, it has to be standardized. So when we're talking about standardization, grouping those coffees, so multiple villages coffees into one segment, say Sidama, all the villages coming under the Sidama area would be grouped together. So we'll have delegations from villages led by the village chief coming and telling you can't change the coffee name for my coffee. So that is how culturally it is. Every celebration in Ethiopia, cultural celebration in Ethiopia, not over before you have a coffee ceremony. So it's a very, very different commodity. It's not just commodity, it's part of culture in Ethiopia.
Yes, it is an epicenter of culture, as you say, which is quite fascinating, which therefore must have made it all the more exciting to be building the Ethiopian Commodity Exchange, which was going to include coffee. So how did you start going about that project? And indeed, what was the state of the project when you arrived?
So when I arrived so initially 5 months I worked for International Food Policy Research Institute, which was supporting the Ethiopia Commodity Exchange project. So we worked on the research and development of the products, development of the processes and everything. And then UN stepped in, and then UN supported the project. So initially, when I went in, it was just a project on the paper. We had to actually define policies, procedures, operational guidelines, softwares to be developed. Whole work was to be done. I remember when we landed. So we were a team of 10 people. When we landed up in Ethiopia, somebody coming from Fannie Mae in US, somebody coming from Accenture, somebody coming from Merrill Lynch. I was there from MCX. So a lot of varied knowledge was there in the team. I remember we going to meet the Deputy Prime Minister, and the Deputy Prime Minister took out a pen from his pocket and say, "Gentlemen, in Ethiopia, if you really want to buy this pen, that would be a process. So things that you take for granted in your part of the world may not be that easy in Ethiopia." And that really, we didn't understand that initially, but we realized when we started to implement the things. So doing anything, implementing anything, there were lot of bureaucratic landmarks to be achieved. Then only things could be done. So it was a very interesting journey. So when I reached to answer your question specifically, it was just on paper that this concept was there. We had to actually build an institution out of that concept.
That's so interesting, yes. And then you've got to, obviously, as everybody has to, make sure that it fits in with what happens in the existing environment of banking, the nation, and so on. So how did you go about choosing the products for the marketplace, and how did that process come about?
Yeah. So initially, the products that were selected were maize and wheat, because these were the food security products. Maize and wheat are the staple diets, apart from teff, which is a locally grown crop. But the tradable crops, maize and wheat, were there. Since it wasn't food security food security based institution, developed on the lines of food security concept, we said that let's start with maize and wheat. Then there were pulses to be introduced. Coffee was nowhere into the picture, or nowhere into the discussion in the early stages of the exchange. Coffee came in because the government realized that this is a platform that can really deliver wonders for coffee. And the government was realizing there are a lot of inefficiencies in the coffee sector. So maybe about, I remember 28th of April, we started the operations of the commodity exchange in Ethiopia. Say the first bell was rang on 28th of April, if I'm right. And then come June, the government said that coffee has to be traded. And it was not a choice. It was told to us that coffee would be traded on the exchange in the next season. And the next season started from November. So So that's how it was. Initially, coffee was not there. The products selected were products which are which are volume are high, which has a lot of market, which has a lot of traders, and which is related to food security.
Very interesting, and thank you very much. Let me say to Ashish Ijardar, that's saying, great interview and knowledge booster. Really appreciate your intervention, Ashish, as we're talking about the winds of change in markets today with Dr. Bharat Kulkarni. I'm sorry. And at the same time, Deepa Gokhale is giving us thumbs up and lots of excellent signs. The symbology, you don't need to be Dan Brown in order to work out, or whatever Dan Brown's character was, whatever his name was. It's not the Da Vinci Code here. It's very clearly the thumbs up and lots of hearts and other encouraging messages for our great speaker today. So Bharat, I mean, when you were looking at all of these sorts of parts of the business, just let's take a step back. You built a floor for trading this market, right? Yeah.
So initially, very initially, the idea was to actually start with electronic trading because that was where the world was going. But for a country like Ethiopia, which does not have a history of stock exchange, which does not have a history of interbank electronic payment system, which does not have a history of a structured market, the learning curve would have been too steep. So it was decided that instead of going for an electronic trading platform right from the beginning, we would actually introduce a flow-based trading system and then migrate to an electronic trading platform. So that's how the flow was developed. And say by then, a lot of knowledge about floor had disappeared, because except Chicago, I think there was no other exchange that was running a flow, not anyone in India. But I actually, in my initial days, was exposed to a flow-based exchange in my home city in Indore, which was the benchmark exchange for soybeans, the National Board of Trade. So I was able to bring in a lot of that knowledge, that understanding, that experience to build the processes for the flow-based exchange. And it was a really exciting experience.
That's quite fascinating altogether. And yes, as you mentioned, it's incredible how you really needed to build these systems and allow for the fact that Ethiopia, well, in fact, only in the course of the last 2 weeks has Ethiopia finally broken through and funded its stock exchange, which is going to be coming to market hopefully sometime before the end of the year. And of course, that reminds us, ladies and gentlemen, of the importance of things like trade finance, which brings us very elegantly on to this week's book of the week. It was written by our IPO-VID guest from episode 118 and Argent Capital Managing Director Andreas Schweitzer. TradeWorks, the trade finance investor, is a whistle-stop tour of the history of how finance can go wrong and how to prevent trade finance from having future problems, making a very, very interesting volume to keep dipping into whenever you're interacting with trade finance. You are welcome to read that book. You can click on links on the site Exchange Invest. While you're there, don't forget you can sign up for our free weekend edition, where you'll get news of what's going to be the next book of the week several days in advance of this live stream going out. You can get that at exchangeinvest.com. And while you're there, don't forget you can also sign up for Exchange Invest, the daily bulletin of the Bourse business, the unique newsletter of the world of bourses. That one costs money, of course, ladies and gentlemen, because we've got to pay for our endeavors somewhere or another. However, we are offering you a free 7-day trial if you would like to taste Exchange Invest before you have to pay the $375 per annum per user. So, I mean, trade finance, all of these different instruments, very, very important to creating the infrastructure of what goes on in a nation. Now we've got a question here, which is very interesting, from Colin Howard, a man himself, a studied builder of exchanges the world around. Huge intellect, Bharat, but did any exchange or product ever make money? I think he's talking here specifically about the Ethiopian question, rather than obviously the multi-commodity exchange, which was a massive profit center.
Yeah. So multi-commodity exchange, of course, everybody knows it was at one point of time the largest exchange for gold contracts and then silver and then natural gas. So I don't need to really talk about multi-commodity exchange and its profitability. But Ethiopia commodity exchange really was a challenge. Initially, we realized that people would not be, say, it would take a lot of time for people to start participating in the exchange. And eventually, I remember on somewhere around 22nd or 23rd of February 2011, the exchange actually celebrated a 1 billion volume. So $1 billion volume was achieved in about 3.5 years time. So that's how that tells me that the exchange really made money. We moved into a $1 billion say club. The average daily turnover was hit at around 10 million every day. And imagine $10 million commodities trading hands every day, changing hands every day. So that was something which really made the exchange proud, and that actually triggered off a lot of reaction in the African subcontinent and that urge to set up their own commodity exchange. So I think, yes, profitability at the ECX was something which really encouraged a lot of countries to start the commodity exchange.
Thank you very much, Bharat. Thank you, Colin Howard, for your question. Lovely to see you again. Colin Howard, of course, also a previous guest on IPO-VID a couple of years back. Great to hear from you, Colin. Thank you very much to Anna Dak for saying, good evening, gentlemen. Very interesting and full knowledge on commodities ecosystem. Thank you very much for your intervention, Anna. Pramod Dixit, Bharat, your decades of experience and knowledge in the field of commodities and trading is unique. There is a lot of takeaways from you. Great going. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pramod. That's a great comment altogether. Now we've got a first actually for the show. We've got a retired wing commander. I do believe that's the first time we've had a retired wing commander. I don't believe we've been much below captain or major previously in terms of retired ranks interacting with us. Wing Commander RD Deshpande, it's lovely to see you, sir. Thank you very much. Good insights, and applauding you 3 times. Thank you very, very much, sir, and thank you for tuning in. So, oh, and we've got an extra comment. Good grief, they're coming in so fast and thick on the stream today. Low latency. Shashank Paranjape, great to hear from you, Shashank. It's a pleasure to hear about your journey. Bharat, what would be your advice to any budding individuals who wants to build a career in this complex subject?
Interesting question. I think I always believe this, that the more the complex subject is, the more opportunity to learn is. And more you start learning about those subjects, the more interesting that subject becomes for you. So I think if somebody wants to build a career in complex subjects, learning, understanding, not fearing the subject, but learning and understanding that subject will help a lot. And what happens, the more you learn about it, the more better you becomes in the competition. As it is, complex subjects have less competition. So it's a much better career option.
Yes, it's always that final 1,000 of your 10,000 hours as you're achieving great expertise gives you incredible ability to have the perspective on how these things work going forward, doesn't it, Bharat?
Yeah.
So tell me, with the Ethiopian exchange then, you very quickly got going with a couple of agri-commodities, foodstuffs, vitally important for food securities. You added coffee soon after that. How did the exchange develop? Were there any hiccups or bumps along the way that you had to try and resolve?
Oh yeah, there were a few. What happens is, in a commodity exchange environment, in a country which is very, very new to this environment, people don't realize, the exchanges really don't, the regulators really don't realize from where the impact may come. Now, I'll tell you a small anecdotal example. In Ethiopia, they were having a lot of issues with the currency rate. The IMF had to step in, and the IMF said that the devaluation of the currency has to happen. Now, devaluation of the currency has a direct impact on the coffee market, because it's all an export commodity. And the coffee market actually was sent. The exchange activities were sent into treasury when the devaluation happened by about 12 or 15, 17% or something. Suddenly, a 17% devaluation. The commodity trading, we had risk management principles which had an day limit for trade, or the price limit as we call it, or the daily price say allowance, and the prices actually went out of it. And the regulators were not ready to release this because they were not sure how. So those challenges definitely came in. Second challenge, definitely stakeholders, the confidence of the stakeholder that this is a government institution. It really is it really would benefit to us. Learning curve was steeper, because exchange actually said that you have to deposit the money in the bank, and only through the bank the transactions would happen. These guys were used to carry money in their sacks, give it to the seller, and settle the trade. So an interesting story I'll tell you. One of the largest trader of coffee in Ethiopia, he used to buy a huge amount of coffee on the auction floors. The exchange started day 2, and the guy ran out of money because his bank account, the amount of funding that he had provided in the bank, he had bought coffee worth all that money. There was no money in the bank to actually support his buy. So we stopped him from trading. And he said, "Oh, you can't stop me. I have a sack full of cash in my car. I'll just bring it, take it, and let me trade, because I'm getting a good deal." He said, "It doesn't happen that way." And it was very difficult for him to understand why does this process why this processes work this way. So those learning curves are also very, very steep.
Yes, I remember also a great story. Lamont Rutten told me the opposite way around, which was the World Bank operating all sorts of fabulous grant schemes to try and give seeds to farmers, and then saying at the end of it, and all the farmer has to do is sign their name here. And of course, the problem was that most of the poor chaps were illiterate in those days, so therefore they could offer you a thumbprint or nothing else, which didn't really work with some person who was working in compliance in the middle of the city of London in EC2, because they just didn't understand how the world works in these sorts of places, which is always an issue. So yes, sacks of cash were not in encouraged. Anand Daksha saying trade works, a great topic to learn. That's discussing the trade finance book we're looking at today. Oh, and we've got a couple of questions have just come in. So I'm going to take one first from Wing Commander RD Deshpande, who's retired. What were the biggest challenges you faced in this journey? How you approached and how did you go about addressing it? Can you amplify with a couple of examples, Bharat?
I think when you create a new structure and a new institution, there are a lot of challenges because you think the market would work away in a certain way, and market doesn't work in that way. And you have to be adaptable enough to actually see what would work and change your strategies midway. So those things definitely were challenges. A small example, anecdotal example I'll give you. We started with as I said, we had people from Accenture leading the IT team. We had guys from the guy from Merrill Lynch leading the business development. We had a guy from Fannie Mae leading the market information system. So all of us coming in with loads of experience. We built a beautiful system. Coffee started trading in the warehouses. The coffee started to come and get deposited. And one day a phone call comes to the IT head. And I and IT head used to work very closely because trading and IT were very close to each other. So he asked me, he was surprised. So I asked him what happened. He said, there's a call from one of the rural villages, and they are saying that there's an IT problem. So he said, okay, so what is the IT problem? Is the system not working? They said, no, the system is working. The power is there. The computer is working. Everything is there, but we can't record the trade. We can't record the deposit. And he said, why? What is the problem? He said, there's a column which is asking us about the truck plate number to be entered into. I said, yeah, so put it. He said, but it has not come on the trucks. It has come on donkey backs. Now, how do I put a plate registration number for a donkey? And for a second, we were like, this is a problem which we never anticipated. So coming from a world where, as I said, a lot of things we take for granted were not happening there. So you had to immediately adapt. And I said, okay, let's do one thing. Keep a paper trail where you say how many donkeys were there and what was the weight of the deposit on each donkey, and just put in D1, D2, D3 as the plate number, and we'll through the paper trail we'll tag it. Now that is something that you have to do because if you say, oh my God, let's reconvene, have a board meeting, and then decide and come back to you, that coffee will disappear, and that confidence will disappear.
Yes.
So confidence was more important because exchanges trade on trust. The first thing that exchange build is trust. And if we lose that trust in the first days of the trade, then there's no coming back for the exchange. So I think those were the challenges. Building that trust was a challenge. But as people realized 1 year later, the same farmers who initially were very skeptical invited the whole of the management team for a celebration. They said, one of the elderly gentlemen told me that he was speaking in the Amharic language, which is the local language for Ethiopia. And he said that I asked a friend of mine to translate it. And what my friend translated me for was that he's saying that I'm 60 years old, 40 years I've spent in coffee trade, and I never thought that somebody would actually wait for me to give out the price. Now, that is something that in a year's time, that feeling coming into the farmers, that feeling of empowerment coming, actually was worth all the effort that we put in.
That's a fabulous example, and several fabulous examples, and a great story. Yes, and the problems of organizing all of your settlement chain, but not thinking about the registration plates for donkeys. That is one of those issues. And there is a grower, someone with the coffee, who's actually doing everything that these days lots of these people in the World Economic Forum would die about, because he's got a perfectly green ecosystem. His donkeys are doing hard work and producing incredible fertilizer at the same time as he's managing to get them to move his coffee around. I mean, that's such a good virtuous circle. Thank you very, very much, Wing Commander Deshpande, for your excellent question. We've actually got a comment straight after on the donkeys. I'm coming to your question in a moment. Asmita Kajanchi is back again. Great, numbering donkeys, an example of a challenge from the grassroots level. Absolutely from the grassroots level, quite literally, Asmita, isn't it? It's quite incredible all round. Now, here's a fascinating question as well, which comes from Dr. Niraj Vijayarjia. I'm sorry, I'm a bit slow on pronouncing Indian names today. I do apologize. I hope you'll forgive me. How do geopolitical factors and global economic trends influence commodity prices and trading patterns in Africa?
I think the Africa is one of the largest suppliers of a lot of food grains and commodities to the world. So the geopolitical tensions, the geopolitical initiatives, or the geopolitical issues definitely percolate down to Africa. But in 2008, very interesting thing I saw in Ethiopia. After 2008, 2009, there were a lot of fund managers from Europe, from US, coming to Ethiopia and trying to look at opportunities for invest. Because that was the time when everybody realized that African economies, the performing African economies, were very insulated from the shocks which came into the Western world. So I think there are, say, that was a benefit to them because they were not so integrated. But in these 10, 12 years, a lot of integration has happened, which means that whatever happens, geopolitical things happen in the global world actually percolates down to Africa very soon now.
And I think isn't the big winner of the last 10 years, it's that joy of this thing. I mean, your life in your hand, this device that allows you, wherever you're traveling in the world, you can find out everything that's going on. We were using them when I saw you in Bangkok just the other month for the AFM conference. We were living off the back of them for our email, for our social media, for all sorts of information, data, our documents, our CRMs and workflow softwares. And my goodness, heavens above, there's even a telephone built into those devices. It's quite shocking, the things that people can manage to produce. So those are very, very much, yes, I think, I mean, a big change. And certainly the leapfrogging of Africa has been a big issue there. Thank you very much. Wing Commander Deshpande is saying, thank you so much, Bharat and Patrick. You're very, very welcome, sir. It's a pleasure to have you joining the show today. And thank you for your excellent question. Thank you, too, for the excellent question to our most recent commenter, which was our question, which just came a moment ago from Dr. Neeraj Vijayavarjiva. I'm getting there gradually, slowly. I'm having a lot of different syllables today that are challenging my English palate. Obviously, I have to try some Indian languages on Duolingo one of these days. So tell me, Bharat, the Ethiopian Commodity Exchange, in the end, pretty much of success, right? I mean, it had an incredible run up and has built a remarkable ecosystem for the nation.
That's true. I think the impact of the Ethiopia Commodity Exchange can be understood from a data point, a research which I did during my tenure with ECX. We did a study of how much of the export potential or export value paid by the exporters actually goes back to the farmer's pocket. So before the exchange came in, about 32%, the farmer's price which the exporters would pay and the price which the exporter would receive in the international market, 32% would go to the farmer's pocket. After the exchange came in, this became 76%. It was significantly high. Now, why would the question would come? Why would an exporter compromise on his margins? Because he was paying his risk was reduced, his storage was reduced, his quality issues were resolved, his payment issues were resolved. All these things were resolved, because of which he was ready to pay a higher percentage to the farmer. So ultimately, if we talk about, especially in India, if we talk about doubling the farmer's income, we actually did it with the Ethiopia Commodity Exchange. And that set a template for the whole of Africa. The African governments realized that this is something which can really revolutionize the agricultural trade. And today that actually led to a lot of initiatives in Africa.
That's a fabulous number, actually. That's absolutely incredible. Something to live by. I mean, truly a great testimony to go from 32% to 76% being captured by the farmer. I mean, that's truly life-changing for previously subsistence farmers to be able to manage to find themselves in a much, much better position. Even if you weren't a subsistence farmer, it still fundamentally improves your lot and helps you educate your children and manage to get going, which is fantastic. Ashutosh Kaushik saying, great going, Bharat, bye. And I think that's a very, very fair comment to make as well. And we also have another question, very interesting, from Dr. Neeraj Vijayavarjiva. How can technology and digital platforms be leveraged to improve efficiency and transparency in African commodity markets?
I think the technology is something that really has revolutionized the trade globally. And digital platforms, it has actually helped bridge the gap between the developed and the underdeveloped markets. And say, if the technology is used in the right way, there was a time, say, when the technology was very limited, was very elite, but now things have changed. But again, the African commodity markets really need to understand what type of technology they need. Sometimes I give an example that sometimes in Africa, what you need is a 4-wheel drive. You don't need a sedan there. A
Yeah.
beautiful sedan or a beautiful, even a Rolls Royce, which runs on the streets in Europe or US, may not be suitable for Africa. So when you actually select the technology platform, you have to understand the ground realities of the African markets and then choose the electronic platform. It may not be very high investment into technology, but then the right investment into technology is more important. So that can really revolutionize the whole trade.
Yes, I think that's a very, very fair point altogether, because what people need are Toyota Land Cruisers or Suzuki Jeeps or whatever those things are, or Land Rovers or something. You definitely don't need to have yourself some incredible piece of Formula One style technology as you get with, say, the world's largest stock markets. Magnificent as that is, and say, for example, the Bombay Stock Exchange and the National Stock Exchange use these days in India, but it's a very, very different market indeed. And we've got a comment from Asmit Kajanchi. Yes, it's a great contribution to Farmers Life, referencing that jump from 32% to 76% of the revenue captured. Absolutely mind-boggling number altogether. And also, of course, the eradication of any need for government subsidy or intervention in the meantime, which is also saving the central coffers of government, which is absolutely superb altogether. And I'm not sure, I think we might be caught up with all of our comments at the moment. I'm not quite sure, but thank you very, very much once again, Dr. Niraj Vijayavargiya, for your excellent questions today. So, I mean, as you look at this whole situation, it's a fascinating world that you've seen built up. You were just telling me you're heading off to do some more work in Africa in the very near future, and it's obviously a very, very lively world out there for exchanges. What was it like on the ground? Just one question, because I did say we were going to talk about her earlier, but Dr. Eleni Gabriel-Medmadin, she was the incredible powerhouse behind this exchange. I remember her turning up at an AFM conference many years ago, I think in Istanbul, and saying, oh, I've got this mandate to build a commodities exchange in Ethiopia. And it was fascinating because she was a very fast learner, she was a very determined lady, and an incredibly intelligent one. What was it like working with her?
Oh, it was a learning experience. It was because of her that I moved to Ethiopia. The vision that she was able to show you, and the vision that she was able to build for the commodity, and the clarity in that vision was really impressive. She was not afraid of challenges. So when the coffee was pushed onto the exchange, said, let's bring it on. And actually looking at her confidence, the whole team was confident that we'll pull it off. It was very easy to say, oh, we are really not ready. Let's look at the next year. Let's look at the next season. But she said, let's do it. So I think those were, and she could actually see the future much better. So I think those were the qualities that helped her to ride this tide, because this was a phenomenal exercise that required a lot of resilience, that required a lot of courage, that required a lot of character to actually pull it off. So her leadership qualities, one of the wonderful leadership qualities that I have seen when it comes to these type of projects.
That's magnificent. It's really, really good to hear. And I'm certainly very excited to see her making a reappearance on the board of the Ethiopian Stock Exchange, because I'm sure she'll be able to give the Ethiopian Securities Exchange a big help forward, given all of her contacts that she made around the world from running the ECX as well. So tell me a little bit, Bharat, if you can let us into a little secret, what sort of projects have you been working on most recently, or what are you doing next?
So we have been working in Malawi, which is more related to agriculture markets and the warehousing related solutions. Prior to that, I worked on a project on introducing the derivatives in Ghana, the Ghana Commodity Exchange. So a little bit of work there. Then we also do a lot of work with Indian investors who want to invest into Africa, so helping them establish the investments. We are looking at some big project investments into Africa as well. So yeah, those are the things.
Fascinating. Never a dull moment I can see in the life of Bharat these days. Quite incredible. So therefore, I mean, unfortunately, we've sped through this conversation with so many wonderful inputs from all of these great viewers during the course of today. Thank you very, very much for your questions and input. Dr. Bharat Kulkarni, tell me, where do you think the capital market revolution goes next?
I would say it's India, because there are a lot of things that are happening in India. If you actually look at the Indian economy, it is one of the fastest growing economy in the world, very high disposable incomes. And recently, in the last 5-7 years, we have built this concept called India Stack, which is a technology platform that is allowing, the first layer was the identity layer, then the payment layer were built in. We have the UPI-based transactions where even a small a vegetable vendor on the street can actually receive and pay money electronically. Now, based on that infrastructure, millions of investors have actually come into the market, which means that there's a lot of inflow coming into the market. The markets are becoming very, very wide-based because when I grew up, the markets were for very elites. Everybody would not be part of the commodity or the investment market, the capital or the stock market or the commodity market. But now, even with small vendors are invested, small traders are investing into that. So that is because of the technology. Recently, the $3 billion IPO of Hyundai has come in. There's paucity of deals happening in Asia. And then the recent restriction on the IPOs in China and the slowdown of China has actually made India one of the brightest spots. So I think in near future, India is where the revolution is going to come from. Africa, I would say it's a little bit ahead. There's still a lot of infrastructural developments to happen in Africa before this moves to India, from India to Africa. But that has been the global trend. Anything that has that has saturated in the Western world actually came to the Asian subcontinent, especially India, China, and then moved into Africa. So I think we are there right now, and in a decade's time, I think African exchanges would be ready.
Yes, that's a very interesting point to end on about African exchanges. But I agree with you completely, with India becoming the most populous country on earth this year and showing no sign of slowing down its birth rate in any way. And certainly the prosperity is growing rapidly while the infrastructure is racing to try and keep up. It's a very, very, very exciting moment in the history of India as it becomes one of the world's absolute superpowers. Thank you very, very much, Dr. Bharat Kulkarni. It has been a pleasure to have you today. I'm sorry we don't have time for that great question from Colin Howard. How can you beat Cargill, Trafigura and Glencore? I think that could be the subject of a whole discussion at some stage in the future. We might get a couple of commodities experts into the studio to try and talk about that, which would be quite good. The relationship between food security and commodity exchanges. I'm terribly sorry, Ashish Mully, we're just running out of time and managed to get there. But the answer is obviously very considerable, given the fact that indeed that was something that Bharat was talking about as a fundamental reason behind the formation of the Ethiopian Commodity Exchange in itself. And Daksha, yes, true, Mr. Bharat, that at the end, farmers should be benefiting in the whole process of electronic trading at a national level. Yes, and if you can capture anything like that growth that you saw in Ethiopia from 32% of the take to 76%, it's an absolute revolution for anybody who's in that market or producing whatever those goods may be. Let me say, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say a huge word of thanks to our production team today. They've been rushed off our feet. Thank you for a great job altogether. Herminia, Marianne and Mary. Next week, we're going to have a change in pace to talk about the future of fintech with Chris Skinner, award-winning author and expert in the fintech field. Do we need intermediaries is going to be the discussion. I suppose in many ways that's continuing the breeze of the wind of change. Our commenters today, I really want to say a huge word of thanks. It's been such an active discussion. Thank you. Anil Banda, Sheila H, Hamu Kulkarni, Dilip Mulye, Radhika Bandi, Aruna Kulkarni, Ashish Mully, Milind Darmadakiri, Samuel Ogola Onyango, Ashish Lijadar, Deepa Gokale, Colin Howard, Anya Dak, Pramod Dikshit, Wing Commander RD Deshpande, Shashank Paranjape, Anand Daksha, Dr. Niraj Vijay Vargia, Asmita Kachanchi, Ashutosh Kauchik. I'm sorry if I've been falling over some of your names. I thoroughly appreciate your wonderful comments. And the last word I'm going to leave actually to Wing Commander RD Deshpande, retired. At present, the Indian economy is one of the most robust economies of the world and at the fastest track right now. Amen. Here's to more and greater and better markets. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Colin Howard, well done. Very good. That's lovely to hear from you all. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Patrick L. Young. This has been an epic IPO-VID discussing the winds of change with our fabulous guest today, Dr. Bharat Kulkarni. Rush out now and get a copy of his book. It's absolutely a must read on this thing. It's a very chatty memoir. There's all sorts of information about Ethiopia in there, as well as the building of markets, which are really make it worthwhile. Bharat, thank you very, very much. My name is Patrick L. Young. If you want anybody to build your markets for us, you know where to call us. Let us know what happens. We'll be back next week. And in the meantime, there's always Exchange Invest Daily. Have a great week in life and markets.